Hi, Leo Drager here. I want to talk about SQL Map in terms of an application. In one of the previous videos, we did a PHP ID equals and tried to find vulnerable SQL injection sites. But in this case, I want to take that one step further and start SQL mapping some databases and some applications. Now, the fundamental problem that I have here with a video like this is the easiest thing to do would go to be to find something vulnerable out on the internet and go poke and prod somebody else's stuff. But you from the confidentiality point of view, you're really not taking advantage of anything that somebody purposely hasn't put out there. I don't want to say purposely. Let's say, because it certainly could be accidental that they don't know that their site's vulnerable to SQL injection, but nonetheless, they're putting it out there. And because it's out there, what do you do with that? Anybody could do anything with it, and therefore, maybe just the disclosure in itself is a problem, especially when you start digging down into the databases, then the tables, then the columns, and then you start pulling, users like admin and then their passwords and getting their hashes. Okay, so technically that's all disclosed, but the problem is legally or ethically, how far are you willing to push the envelope on and poking and prodding on somebody else's system? So, I don't particularly like that approach. Now, there are plenty of videos out there where people are getting all the way down and showing you SQL map all the way to usernames and passwords and frankly, even cracking passwords. We're not going to take that approach. We're going to try to operate more on the ethical side of legal, or the legal side of ethical, however you want to look at that. So let's go ahead and start looking at SQL map. So if you just type in SQL map, you'll get basically the syntax. But just for the record, it's under Kali Linux, web applications, database exploitation, and then somewhere in here it's SQL map. Here it is under web vulnerability scanner, SQL map here. So it truly is a vulnerability scanner as opposed to a database exploitation, which is like SQL Ninja and things like that, which we'll probably cover in other videos. All right, so it's Python, SQL map, and then your options. So Python, SQL map, and then the options. So in this case, it tells us, hey, we're missing a bunch of stuff. No wonder. You could do a SQL map -H, and that'll get you the help. And it's not that bad. Now, the absolute key takeaway here is to understand that databases, most cases, but in this case, are hierarchical. So what you're ultimately doing is you're trying to put a puzzle together. You're trying to go from the biggest picture and drill down to the smallest picture of the hierarchy, but in the smallest part of the hierarchy, you want the most valuable resources, like usernames and passwords. Okay? So it's a big puzzle, big game that you're always trying to play here. And approach it just like that, a big game. Okay? And so what you can see here is just some of the basics overview of the command. You've got -H or tac help. This is what you're looking at right now. You've got advanced help, which we can cover that later. You can have verbose mode. 0 to 6 is a range there. The target, okay, you're always going to use the -U, or realistically you could use --URL and then equals and then whatever your URL is. I personally prefer just the -U, and then you can actually use Google dorking. Google dorking is a term that's been coined for some time now, but what it actually does is when you click on a Google link, okay, if you notice the URL when you're doing this, Google in itself will send the link to Google, then process it internally, then redirect you to the actual search results that you want. So Google dorking is taking the Google search results and basically processing these queries as Google search results as opposed to the actual targeted URL. So my point is that you can actually just take Google search results, put them in SQL map, and process them that way. That's called Google dorking. Okay, and then the request, which you want to try to find, data, cookies, random, proxy, Tor, things like that. Injection, basically test for SQL injection. By far, the most popular component here that I ever use is the -- DBMS, or database management system, and then the particular database management system. Like, for example, PHP, ASP, ASPX, or -P. Just test a bunch of parameters to try to guess that. You can have detection levels, right? You can set up the risk levels, which are, default both set to 1. Then you've got the specific techniques if you want to get a little bit more advanced. Then you can try to enumerate a bunch of stuff. Now, you will use a handful of these enumeration options here as you dig down in the hierarchy. Now, just let's review the hierarchy just so it's there. First, it's the database. Then once you understand the database, then it's the tables in the database. Once you get to a particular table, then it's the columns. Once you get to a particular table and you know what columns you want, like username, password, admin, web, e-commerce, whatever it is, then you can actually go down to -- dump, will actually dump the entries in that entry. Now, it's not until you get all the way down to the -- dump where you actually start pulling usernames and passwords. Okay. And then the other things that you'll use here, by far the most popular, is once you find the database, then you want to use the -D and specify it. Once you find the specific table, then you want to add in the -T. So what you end up doing in the big picture here is you start building this command structure out. So I'm going to show you the basics of how to start building out a SQL map statement, and I will show you what it looks like on websites that basically have very, very little vulnerability, also that I own and control. And then further things that you can do if you really just want to, throw the spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks, you can do an OS shell to see if you can get prompted for an interactive shell, or OS -- PWN or pwn or own, or however you want to say it. So those are others. Lastly, there is a wizard. You can try that. This is nice. Again, it says it right here for beginners. So you could start there. But, once you kind of know how to build this, like I'm showing you to build this, the wizard almost becomes irrelevant right away. Okay. So that's the overview of the SQL map help and how to build it. Now let's go into how I would want you to actually start building this stuff out. So what I want you to do is go to your desktop and create an empty document, and I don't know, you can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it SQL map for the record, and I'm going to open it. And it's going to be helpful to kind of keep this off to the side, because this is going to make cutting and pasting, so much easier. So I'm going to try to move my windows around a little bit so you can see what's what. Okay, so I am going to do attack you, and then we're going to do the website http://linuxwarrior.com. Now, I will tell you, you have to watch your syntax here. If that's why it's really, really helpful to copy and paste. That way you don't mess up your syntax. Because if I do something like SQL map and I do index .php ID = 1 here, notice the syntax error. There's no / between the .com and the index. This command will run absolutely just fine. You will not get any results, and you will go, oh, well, it didn't work. Meanwhile, what you have is a glaring syntax option that you just didn't catch. Okay? So, just disclaimer, watch your syntax. Okay? So we're going to do the URL, and then we're going to do a -- DBS, our databases, okay? And it's going to go through, and we get a little summary here. So don't forget that there's two dashes here, -- databases. And what we're trying to do is just say, hey, let's go to this linuxwarrior.com website, which again, I own and control, and go see if we can't pull down the databases and get the maps. All right. Everybody should know how to do this. If you have any public-facing website, you need to know how to do this, because the attackers know how to do this. So why shouldn't you know how to do this for yourself? Okay. So legal disclaimer: usage of SQL map for attacking targets without prior mutual consent is illegal. Right? It is the end user's responsibility, meaning you go to jail, not me, to obey all applicable local, state, and federal laws for whatever country you're in. The developers assume no liability and are not responsible for any misuse or damage caused by this program. In other words, these SQL map folks are basically held harmless. It tells you what time your test started, okay, and then basically, some timestamps, and you're basically looking for information on critical. Now it says testing connection to the target URL. Okay, great. Testing if the target URL is stable. This can take a couple of seconds, sometimes even minutes if you have a really slow connection. The target URL is stable, so great. That's always something you're going to look for. And then we get a critical warning here. No parameters found for testing in the provided data. So you can use the get parameter ID and, for example, this. So in other words, this output is telling me is that I didn't supply enough information. This is why it's helpful in your search results to grab something like your PHP ID and grab this whole string here. And I'm just using this as an example. I'm not saying go to Google and test this person's website, but it's this whole string here. And I'm just really just showing you Google search results, and this will probably change. And it's actually telling you the exact syntax that it wants. So we're going to change our syntax just a little bit to see if we get any results. So we're going to add a forward index.php $ID is equal to 1. Okay, and then leave your dash DBSs and let it run again. And you will notice right away, you get your legal disclaimer, your start time, it's testing the connection, and it says SQL, because I actually went to a PHP page this time, SQL map got a 301 redirect to basically a login page. Do you want to follow this? In this case, I don't, because I don't want to try to log into the destination website. I just want to test for SQL injection. So I'm going to say no. So testing if the target is stable. This can take a couple of seconds. Warning, the get parameter ID does not appear dynamic. Okay. Heuristic basic tests show that the get parameter ID might not be injectable. And in this case, I'll just tell you, mine's not. But let this run anyway, because all of this is documentable stuff that you can use for your penetration testing reports. So even no results are good results because you're proving, hey, I'm not vulnerable. And then you get to learn about how these tests work. Okay, so we're basically just going to hang out here on autopilot and read this like a novel. And I'll try to do this relatively as it's going. It may take a couple minutes because we are doing a heuristic test here, so it's going to try basically a whole bunch of stuff, and we're going to even get some timeouts. So heuristic. Basic test shows the get parameter ID might not be injectable. Woohoo for me. However, if this was a vulnerable site, we very well start getting table results right away, which I would then go ahead and then copy the table names and add those right in here. So the first thing that I would like to document in here is let's see, the URL that you test. Okay, and then you can copy and paste that right here. So I'm going to do http://linuxwarrior.com/index.php $ID is equal to 1. All right. So even though I wrote that out, more than likely you're going to copy and paste that for simplicity. Okay. So now you have that. And then if you really realistically wanted, you could even do your whole, SQL, map statement -u, http://linuxwarrior.com index.php $ID is equal to 1 --dbs or the databases. Okay. And I'm going to show you how to build this out. Okay. So keep your documentation going and build this. This will definitely help you for your pen testing reports, but also make your life easy as you build out this tool and go from the top of the hierarchy down to the specifics of the hierarchy, or stated differently, generic to specific. Okay. So in this case, it's testing for SQL injection, get parameters, Boolean based blind, where or using the where or having clause. It's testing for MySQL, anything greater than 5.0, error based SQL injection, Postgres SQL, Microsoft SQL, and again, the where and the having. So I'm not going to say that anymore because it's pretty much on the end of all of them. It's testing for Oracle. And then we get this critical warning here, connection timeout to the target URL proxy SQL MAC is going to retry. Okay, fine. Then it goes and performs some additional tests, performing the SQL inline queries, and the same thing, just different databases. So inline queries, inline queries, inline queries, inline queries, testing MySQL greater than 5.0, inline queries. And then it times that again. There is considerable lagging in the connection's response. Please use a higher value for the dash time seconds. I generally leave this as is. I could add a dash time sec, of like 30 seconds or 60 seconds or whatever you want. It really just depends on how aggressive you want to be. But you notice the command will just time out, wait, and then it'll start new tests. Next, it goes into stack queries. So you can see all of these end in stack queries for Postgres, Microsoft, MySQL, Postgres, or actually this switches to time-based blind for the rest of them. So it's constantly switching between, the top databases, then the specific types of tests. And then it goes through, and you can see I'm timing out again. So this is good. Even though I'm timing out here, this is good. Another thing that you could do here while this is running is I could go ahead and try to redirect my output to basically a file. So if you really wanted good documentation for your pen testing reports, just go ahead and do, dash, SQL map, maybe the date, that you want. So dash, month, day, year.txt or something like that. That way all of this output automatically gets dumped to a file, and then you don't have to copy and paste anything, right? So it's actually done. So again, right now we're just doing a quick sanity check to see if there's actual databases that we can actually find on our target. So the first thing is the databases, then it's the tables. Once you get to a table, then it's specific columns. Once it's the columns, then you start looking for, good columns like users, passwords, anything that you would consider a quote of interest, end quote. And then you'll go ahead and dump that out. So in this case, it's going to just keep timing out here, and it's pretty much running to the end of the life of this command. And you can see I was not able to pull any public databases down from this site. So I know everybody wants to see, hey, I want to see the tables, right? You want to see it, I know, but it's just as important to see what a secure website looks like versus what an insecure website. If you start poking and prodding and doing this to things that you're not supposed to be doing it, I assure you, eventually you will find a vulnerability. But it's important to understand what secure looks like before you can start exploiting insecure. Some of the other videos that you'll find out on the internet, they go right to a secure, insecure database because they've already found it, and they just go right to it, and they show you how they can pull usernames and passwords off of a database, in a couple of seconds. What I'll end with is that if this was able to pull down the databases, we would get a big section of white text here where it actually say, here's the databases that we found. And then I would copy all of that to, my databases. So in this case, I'll actually just tell you what the database is. So if this was vulnerable, if Linux Warrior was vulnerable, you put a section for tables, then column, then users, which will use the -- dump command, etc., etc. And you can even do that here. All right. So in this case, I will actually tell you the table. And the table is Linux underscore word P. Okay. That just happens to be the specific table where all of the stuff is that I'm using so far. Okay. So nonetheless, that's basically the build up to our next command. All right, but you can see here I got a warning using an unescaped version of the test because zero knowledge of the backend database. So in this case, you can use the --dbms. Like I said that when we were doing the help, this --dbms is helpful because we can do PHP or ASP or ASPX or whatever the backend database management system is. So we could have specified that. That does help speed up some of these tests. But what we're doing here is not necessarily going for speed. We're going for just testing all possibilities to see if we can guess them. And therefore, I specifically want to leave that off here, especially when I'm working at the highest level here, which is the --dbs component. All right, so you'll let this run and eventually it's going to time out here and basically SQL map will shut down. You would have all of this documented, copy it to your documentation, and then you move on. And that is the absolute basics of starting the structure of the SQL map sequence of queries that you're going to use. So again, from the top, you start with finding a vulnerability. Once you find a site that is vulnerable in any way possible, single tick is the easiest. Then you go to the databases. Once you get to the databases, then you go to the tables. Once you find a good table, then you find good columns. Once you find good columns, then you can dump the information out of those columns and then start looking for users and passwords and things like that. And then, of course, document all of this. And luckily enough, this finished right just in time here. So it finished by saying, hey, shutting down. Great. So that concludes the introduction, basic how to go attempts to grab databases from SQL Map. So my name is Leo Drager. Thank you for watching. And don't forget to check me out. And Cybrary, don't forget to use it as much as you can because it's designed for free resources. There's plenty of videos, resources. You can make connections. You can send messages. You should be using this by now and making connections, right? It's a social network for basically IT security people. And there's been a lot of really good discussions and dialogues. And what that does is that gives me the feedback to what do you guys want to see. So please connect. Send your messages either publicly or privately. Send them, get them over, and let's start the dialogue. My name's Leo Drager. Thanks you for watching. And the easiest way to maintain the connection is through the social networks and Cybrary IT. So don't forget to check us out on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. And make sure you like, share, and use the website and the resources and the videos as much as you can. And I'll see you guys in the next video.